sometime. There we go. Now we're live. Off script and not staying on topic at all. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Live here on Keystroke Medium. It's season 3, episode 15. I am Josh Hayes here with Chuck Manley and Scott Moon, and today Ken Lazito returns to the show. He was on the show back in May in season 2, but apparently everything that he said during that episode was absolutely wrong. And so now he's come back to set the record straight. He is a full-time author now, where he wasn't back then. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Yeah, all the episodes that he was on earlier before, and all the episodes before this, all wrong. So now we're gonna set it straight today. So everybody in the live chat, welcome to the show. I hope everybody had a great weekend and is having a fantastic Monday. And Ken, welcome back, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me.
That was a really good intro on my part. Thank you very much. And if you haven't noticed, I'm wearing my Reading Rambo shirt today. And I just decided to share with you guys Reading Rambo. Ken showed us his Firefly coffee cup right before the show during the pre-show, and it reminded me that I had the Reading Rainbow shirt. So
I don't think anybody can miss it because everybody's focused right in on it as soon as
it's right there. I saw right there.
You need a pop-up or like a overlay for it.
I cannot stand that the overlays don't work. I don't.
They quit working. I didn't even know that, man.
Yep, quit working. I don't know why. It's ridiculous. Sucks. So, Ken, you were on last year, and we talked a lot about your Safranarian Order and the the Rising Force Infinity's Edge. What's that series called?
It's the Ascension series.
Ascension. Yeah. Yes. We talked a lot about those two series, and you briefly mentioned the First Colony series, which actually we used as a show sponsor several months ago when it first came out in September of last year. And since then, book 1 has garnered 418 reviews with a 4.6 star average, which is very, very cool. And then the reviews have kind of carried through. I mean, you see a really good tale on the series. So let's jump right into the meat of this thing and talk about that, and then talk about maybe going into full-time writing later. But tell us about this First Colony series, man.
Well, the premise is obviously a colony, right? And the colony was designed to have limited military presence in there. So they end up going to a world that wasn't their ultimate destination, and our protagonist is somebody from the military who was shanghaied into the colony. So it's a bit of a fish out of water type story, but with a military sci-fi slant. And when I launched it, it just boom. I mean, it just took off, and I kept waiting for it to come down, and it just never did.
Are there any factors that helped it launch? You know, like maybe someplace you first mentioned it.
Now, it's like a week before I was going to launch. I was in CC Akeke's anthology with short stories, and I reached out to about 6 or 7 of those authors and said, "Hey, you want to do a newsletter swap?" Because I was going to launch at 99 cents because I had 2 books ready to go, and I was writing the third one. And I had, pre-order. I could talk about the pre-order stuff too, but I just said, "You guys want to mention this?" And then I just sent it to my own email list. Mm-hmm. I didn't do what I call over-engineering the launch, which I think can hurt you. I've done that, and that book has never really sold well, and it can't be because I didn't write the book well.
No. We're all brilliant here.
God, can't be that at all.
Nothing but geniuses are allowed on this show, man.
Right, just pure.
You're golden. Awesome. Don't worry about
it. It had nothing to do with mixing genres. Now, actually, it was my learnings from that led me to pay more attention to what readers want, and the gamble paid off because the First Colony just exceeded all my expectations.
So it's kind of a shift. I mean, you mentioned the genre swapping or whatever, because you have the epic fantasy, and then you have some space opera, and this is kind of a military fantasy or a military sci-fi, and it's categorized under Space Marine on Amazon. But do you think the genre has anything to do with that, or I mean, what are your thoughts on why it's launched bigger than the other series?
Well, I targeted a specific audience. I I have like a folder in my Chrome, bookmarks from authors to watch, and they're like guys who have been successful for a while. Some of them have fallen off, but people like Jay Allen who've been around for a while, Nick Webb, Richard, guys who consistently delivered to an audience and wrote good series. And I look at, I read their reviews and I looked at what the tropes the people were really connecting to, and I brought those things into the story I wanted to tell. So I didn't want to tell another story about defending Earth because there was a lot of other great guys who already told that story. So, spoiler alert: Earth is dead. I kill Earth. Yes, frack Earth. No,
just get that out of the way at the outset.
Nuke it is the only way to be sure.
They don't know this until towards the end, where things revealed that something really messed up happened back home, and there could be something coming to get us. We don't know. So there was that. So when I designed the story, I was like, well, I want a strong male protagonist. I want him to be in the military because I wanted to write that kind of story specifically, rather than just a space opera story that had some military sci-fi. I lost the thought. Military sci-fi aspects of it, but that wasn't the core. Like the Ascension series is a straight up space opera story that has some military aspects, but the main characters are not military. Where in the First Colony series, Connor Gates is a colonel in of the special forces, and he finds himself 200 years in stasis on an alien planet. So that was fun. And I like the frontier type stories. I'm a fan of Stargate, and whenever they went someplace that had some remnant civilization there, those are my favorite episodes. And I was like, boy, we need more that kind of story out there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love Stargate, and I also those also were my favorite ones when they were sort of like doing the whole archaeology kind of thing, and they had the figuring out what happened before they ever got there. Those were good stuff. Yeah,
there's a built-in suspense and tension with the new contact, world like that.
Yeah, and I have archaeologists in the story because I like that stuff.
It's fun. It's just
basically
fun.
why it's in there. It's like, well, how else are you gonna? Who else is qualified to figure out what happened to a species that's not really there anymore, but you find remnants of their civilization?
I love those kind of mystery things where you find an ancient, whether it's in fantasy or in science fiction, where they find remnants of some long lost deal, and you have to kind of interpret what happened and where they went and if they're coming back. I really like those mysterious aspects to stories.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a little bit ago, I think you said overloading the launch or overthinking the launch when you were talking about
over-engineering
it. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you did different for this First Colony?
Over-engineering launch is, in my mind, is running a bunch of ads once you get the book up there and not giving the Amazon algorithms a chance to learn how to sell your book. So I know like Chris Fox talks about this, and he experienced some of the similar things where he pumped a bunch of money into launching this one series that did okay. I don't think it did as well as he wanted it to do. So that's why I kind of did, well, I made sure the cover was right. The blurb was good. And obviously the book homework was done. And the people I did newsletter swaps with, had an audience that, I would want to be presented to as potential readers that I wanted. So that's really what I did for launch. It's what I'll continue to do when I launch other series. But yeah, it's pretty much. I didn't run any ads for this series until I ran like one Facebook ad, and I didn't think I don't think it made a huge difference. I didn't spend much money on it other than like $5 a day, and I just was using it as a way to point outside traffic into Amazon. Right. Again, just to help that algorithm learn how to sell it, because it stayed in like 200 to 400 for rankings for like 4 months.
Well, it's What's it's been out since September, and you're still under 1,000 in the paid store. I mean, I can't think of any better to do on what is that, 4 or 5 months?
Yeah, it went below 1,000. I had it at full price, and I lowered it to 99 cents when I launched book 4, and I just left it there because it went right back down to like 600 or 500, and I was like, I don't, everything else was full price, so why not leave it there when I had 3 other books after that at full price?
I find that interesting because the idea of a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day cliff is really dogmatic right now in publishing, indie publishing or new publishing right now. But I'm seeing more and more examples of people who maintain their rank for several months or a year and so on. So I'm wondering if there are other factors, but I know the 30-day drop off is real, but I think there might be other factors.
But what I did with launching a series is, as soon as book 1 was published, I had the pre-order up for book 2 with its date 30 days in advance. And then when book 2 went live, I had a pre-order up for book 3, which again was 30 days in advance. And I had, and the purpose for that was just to get the impulse buys from people who finished book 1. And it didn't end with a cliffhanger. It wrapped up the story, but it was like, I wanted to get I didn't want them to forget who I was.
Right.
And I had a lot of pre-orders for book 2 and even more for book 3 as the series started to take off.
Very cool.
I didn't do pre-orders for book 4 because I knew it was going to be more than 30 days beyond. And I was like, well, by the end of last year, I was done. I needed a break.
Yeah. So is the series over? How long are you going to see it continue?
As long as people want to buy books from it, as long as there's interest. So I had different arcs for the series. The book 1 was, an introduction to the planet. 2 and 3 kind of go together as an overarching arc of, what happened with Earth. And then book 4, because I wrote book 4 based largely in part of the interest in book 1 and what readers were commenting on. They reached out to me or in the reviews was that they really liked a new world to explore. Mm-hmm. And as I was reading those, I was like, oh shit, because the second 2 books are, it's ships in space fighting, fighting over. I'm like, fuck, they're not going to like this. I might have lost some, but a lot of people did like the ships in space fighting. So I thought book 4 was a nice way to go back to New Earth and get to really explore this planet. And book 5 is going to be going in deeper into the exploration of that new world and the species that used to live there.
That's very cool. Species. I like series like you're describing where some series is from book 1 to whatever it is, it's the same story, like the same overarching story all the way through. And I don't know that, are you setting these up kind of episodic and where they're kind of self-contained stories almost in the universe and just kind of exploring different aspects of that? Or is there some big overarching conspiracy or mystery or battle or something that's happening in the background?
Yeah, from here on out, I'm trying to tell complete stories that if I had to walk away, I could. Like with the Ascension series, I couldn't do that. I just finished the 6th book to wrap up the series, even though it's been almost a year since I wrote in the series. But there was read-through who went from the First Colony series to the Ascension series were like, hey, what about this one? And I was like, yeah, I need to do that. And I didn't want to be put in that position again where I had to wrap things up. So I'm trying to make the stories wrapped up with the potential to go on without really having to, if not enough people are interested in.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good idea. I like that. Kind of like what Scott's doing on his Dark Landing stuff with Craig Martell, except on a bigger scale, I think.
Right.
Because what are the typical lengths of your books? Like 60, 70, 80,000?
They're between 80 and 90 on that one. Yeah, Ascension series, I started off in the 60s because I wasn't even sure if people were going to like my science fiction. and they sold better than my fantasy. So I was like, well, I like this, so let's do that.
Any thoughts on going back to fantasy at all? Or, I mean, obviously this is where the money's at for the first colony. So
yeah, the top part of my business plan is pay my mortgage. So I am going to write things that people want to read.
Right.
Feed these children so they stop crying.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So last time you came on, you still had a regular day job, and you were still, I think, like everybody, kind of aiming for that full-time author position in life, and then it kind of got thrown at you, and you weren't, so to speak, really prepared for it. And so, do you want to talk a little bit about that and kind of what the struggle was when you went to full-time?
Okay. Well, before I was on the podcast, about 3 weeks before, I found out I was going to be laid off by the end of the summer. And while I had a great year the year before, it didn't. I made like 3/4 of my salary, so there was potential there, but it wasn't going to be enough to pay the bills. So that kind of, gave me a kick in the ass. All right, if I want to do this, I need, my last ditch effort was to, write these 3 books in a new series to see if I can make enough to pay my bills for 6 months. And then I would write more books to keep paying my bills.
Right.
Because one of the things I noticed with the Ascension series, while there was reader follow through with it, it was lessening as, by book 5. It wasn't nearly as big as when I launched book 3. So I knew I had to do something new and something a little bit more specific, like, writing to a specific audience. All right. So to allay my wife's fears of changing careers.
Also important, you should have that on your bullet point of your business plan.
That's number 2 on his business plan.
Have a house.
It was the reason why I wrote a business plan to begin with. I had all this crap in my head that I was doing, and I said, all right, because at first I was like, I think I'm going to try being a full-time author. And she's like, well, aren't you going to look for a job at the same time? And I'm like,
no.
That's dumb.
So she kind of clamped up and was looking scared. I was like, all right, let me lay down a business plan. A lot of the things I was already doing, but it kind of made me a little bit organized in that this is, whenever I got scared, I went back to the plan and tweaked it and addressed the fear. But it was a lot of comfort having a plan to go to. Like I was going to, go for 60 after the first Colony series was launched, go to a 60-day release cycle and continue on. I lost my train of thought now. Business plan.
Business plan and how to keep your wife from.
Yeah. Well, so when I laid out the plan, the important part of that plan was at the end was if things aren't going according to plan, in other words, if you're not earning enough money, you need an exit plan. And, I'm like, well, if I fall below this level, it means I have to start looking for a job. The other thing was, and that was important to her because I wasn't going to be like, oh, your husband's a writer. Good luck. Stuff like that, which is kind of the reaction she gets now. But, they don't know.
Well, I think it does 2 things. It reassures them, it reassures your spouse or significant other for people in general, but it also puts a little bit of pressure on you. Because if you really want to do this, it's also for you as much as your relationships is like, I have to do this or I'm going to have to, go back to writing as a hobby. And that can be motivating for some people.
Oh, it was, because it made me, I always felt like I took it more seriously the more I did it. When I started making some real money at it, and I was like, hey, this could be. Now the fear is, well, how long can I do this? Will I be here in 2 years? That it's that kind of stuff that can only be answered as I execute my continuous plan.
Well, so
as we press forward.
I'm curious then. that when they came down and said, hey, at the end of the summer, you're not going to have a job, did that change your production schedule at all to get these books done so that you could hit those 30 or 60-day release windows for the series? Like, how did that affect your writing for that time? I'm sure, like, for me, I would have been panicking, like, oh God, I need to get this done.
I have a journal with about 30,000 words of my daily freak out. I'm like, I'm really scared. I hope this is going to work. And, that kind of crap helped. They really did help a lot because for me, I'm a writer. I write things out, and that's how I think. So I actually used it to help get better at dictation, because if my income, my livelihood is dependent on me typing, I need a backup plan. I spent 20 years in IT security with coming up with contingency plans for like exploits and stuff. I can't just rely on me typing. If I break my hands, I can't work. What solidified that was when you guys had David Weber on. He's like, I was like, holy shit, really? I've been reading that guy for years.
Yeah, that was really interesting. He talked about that he was having the tendonitis or whatever. And I know that when we talk about the repetitive use injuries, a lot of writers bring up that's a problem. Everybody's concerned with that. So it's a good tool. It's not for everyone, and I think it takes practice.
Yeah. We could talk about dictation, but but yeah, it was definitely a kick in the ass. That last summer was really tough because I had the summer slump, so the income was going down because I wasn't releasing, and I was writing books in a series I had no idea was going to actually find an audience. Mm-hmm. So I like the when people buy the books, obviously, but when they if they enjoy it, right. There's no way you can know that. And I'm sitting here starting book 3, and I'm like, God, I hope I'm making a lot of good decisions here, because if not, I'm going to have to pivot really quickly and do something else. So
I'm curious then, did you, because you stopped writing the Ascension series to do this.
Yeah.
Was that a conscious decision you made because of the layoff situation? I mean, the Ascension series did really well. You've got some really good reviews on that book. But starting this new series, this is something that you did because of having to do the full-time switch, and you didn't think the Ascension series was going to carry you into that?
Partially, yeah. I mean, okay. I knew I wanted to do. I always have thoughts on the next series going on in that. So I was going to write this series anyway. It didn't it got a lot more important, as these new developments came about. So, Ascension series wasn't enough for me to quit my job. First Colony, I was lucky that it was. Even if I was working for them, I would have quit by now.
Yeah. Well, and also I was going to say, when we were mentioning, getting spouse and family on board with the full-time decision, at least in your position, you could show kind of a stable history of income where you're you're not having to start kind of from ground zero and going, I'm getting laid off, I'm going to be a full-time writer now, and I don't have any books. You know what I mean?
I have 4 years of metrics, and each series, each book I launched did better than the last one. So it was that, that nice swoop up. It's getting harder to do better than before though. So, right. I had that history. My wife was aware of it. She's still like, how long can this last? I'm like, I don't know.
Does there come a point when you're going, I can make enough to feed us and pay the bills, to where you're saying, I'm literally wasting money by not spending more time writing? Because there comes a point where, like, I could make this much money writing, or I could go work for whatever dollars an hour at my other job. And so I think you probably cross that threshold. That makes, and also we have a question about what your poster is in the background. So.
Oh, that's the cover art for Sanctuary, which is book 4. That's Jeff Brown. That's like my favorite book cover now. That's I just think it's awesome. Yeah. As soon as I got the final artwork, I was like, yeah, let's go to Staples to a poster because it's going on my wall.
There you go.
I love his work, and your covers for the series are really beautiful. I really like them a lot.
Thanks. Yeah, he's done, oh God, 9 or 10 of my books. So yeah, I keep going back to Jeff, but I'm worried that he's going to get so busy he's going to tell me no. Because I actually went to Jeff. This is how delayed I was. I went to Jeff at the beginning of September, and I said, Jeff, I need 3 book covers. I'm like, can you fit me in? This is, because I'm like the last when it comes to titles and stuff like that. And he's like, I said, this is the time frame I'm working with. Can you help me out? And he said yes. And then that the cover for Genesis, it was really good. And that helped a lot too. Getting the people intrigued.
Good covers matter. So, but I guess what I'd ask you is did you ever come to a point where you're like, my best use of my time is more writing?
It's kind of hard to say because I was in that mindset that this job is going away. And I got used to it was basically working 2 jobs. It took me a lot to pull back after it was all said and done, and I wasn't, I wasn't going to be hurting for money, income. That's another thing I want to talk about. But making this a full-time job, but not full-time. Kenny has to work 80 hours a week to do. Even though I love it, but I got other things I need to do too. Otherwise,
right.
My family, hates me. So,
right.
I do try to take things like weekends off, but there, sometimes at the end, I got to work the weekends too. I would say if I hadn't gotten laid off when I did, it just wouldn't have made any sense because that environment I was working in was not the best. It was what do you call it? It was toxic.
Right.
So, and that's stuff I don't really realize until you're out. You realize it's bad and, you really need to change, but I didn't want another job like I had at the time. I wanted to be a full-time author. And even then, even last summer, I didn't really understand what being a full-time author was. I didn't really gain that until being serious about what being full-time meant. When you work or how you plan the projects you select, how you manage your money, because that's you can't live month to month on your royalties. That otherwise you're gonna fail. Then it's not a position I ever wanted to be in, where your back is against the wall, and that's just not a good position to be in.
Yeah.
So what I did was, I figured out what my current budget was. This is what this is what I was bringing in, and this paid the bills. So I spread that out over the year, and I said, okay, can I hit this number? And then I can maintain that. So what I did was that was my target to hit, where my bills are paid for a year in advance. So if you have things like the slump or they change something or whatever, I got a year to come up with a plan to help mitigate that, and it's not like hard and fast, all income stops unless Amazon yanks my account, which would suck really bad.
That would hurt.
Yeah. So,
but you're talking about as indie writers, or, you should have a budget and you should be able to stick to your budget and not do like I would probably do. I'm like, hey, I had a great month. I'm going to buy a new car. Yay.
Yeah. Not only do you need a budget, I think you need to have like that cushion. You need like 6 months worth of expenses set aside in case you hit a big slump or you get, some sort of tendonitis problem and you can't write. You need to have that backup money because it's an unpredictable way to make a living, so it goes a little bit beyond budgeting, I think.
And always set aside, like in my spreadsheet, when I put incomes in there, the tax is already calculated. So it's like, you got X, but when Y is paid, this is what you really have. So I don't want to be in that situation where I owe what? It's,
right.
It's a lot more than when you're working for somebody else.
Did you make those calculations yourself, or do you have a software you use to help you make sure you have it all figured?
I have an accountant, and I've had an accountant for a few years to help with taxes. And he's like, what are royalties? And I'm like, it's just income. Because I had to explain to him what the business, what I was trying to do. And I just, they have the calculations for you on the federal government website that says, well, if you earn between here, it's your arm, and then it's your leg, and then it's something else.
Yeah.
When I was working for a company, the taxes were much less because I was already paying into it, and I just wanted to make sure I didn't have a huge tax bill, in this time, now, because next week they're due. So
that's important to remember, because you got to pay all your own Social Security and all that stuff, if I understand correctly. When you're a self-published author or an independent business person or an entrepreneur, all that stuff your employer puts in there kind of adds up.
Yeah, I made the first quarterly tax payment. I'm like, God, and the next one is in June. I'm like, why 2 months? And then nothing until September. I'm like, God, it sucks. But that's what it is.
It is what it is.
I kind of want to dive down into a little bit about your what you thought being a full-time writer was going to be like, and then what it actually is like. But I want to read our show sponsor here real quick before we get any further into that. So our show sponsor today is Blue Shift by Josh Dazelle. He's been on the show before. His Blue Shift novel is a brand new standalone novel that came out, I want to say like a week ago, maybe a little bit longer.
About a week, yeah.
So the blurb goes as this: if you could be the first to lay eyes upon a planet orbiting a distant star, would you go? If it meant that when you returned home, everyone you knew would have been dead for centuries, would you still go? The members of the Polaris Project knew what they were giving up when they volunteered to fly to the new star named Angel 21, but the allure of being the first explorers to leave the solar system far outweighed the risks. As it turned out, the most dangerous thing they faced wasn't the mission, it was the homecoming. 800 years have passed, and Earth is nothing like they thought it would be. As Commander Marcus Brentwood scrambles to uncover the mystery of what's happened to Earth in their absence, he also must contend with an increasingly dysfunctional crew and a damaged ship that's flying on borrowed time. What should have been a joyous return home after a long, hard mission has turned into a race to see which nightmare would kill them first. Blue Shift is an all-new science fiction adventure from Joshua Dazelle, the author of the Omega Force series and the Black Fleet saga. I'll see if the link works today. It hasn't been. If history is anything to show on this show, the link will not work, but I'm going to put it in the live chat anyway. It's in the show notes under the comments or under the video if you're watching live or later on the broadcast. You can click there, go check it out. Blue Shift by Josh Dazelle. Check it out.
Yep.
So talking about full-time writer, this is something that Scott and I and Chuck have been talking about a lot over the last several weeks, and we mentioned it on the show several times about when and how and why. And we've mentioned already that yours was kind of a forced blessing to go full-time. But how different was it, when you sit back and you kind of daydream, this is what I'm going to do when I'm a full-time author. I'm going to smoke cigars and sit out on the back and put my feet up and type a couple hours on my laptop out at the beach and drink Mai Tais. What did it actually mean for you to go full-time?
Well, I didn't really realize it probably until like a month and a half ago. Like, all right, it finally sank in. Because I had a severance from there. I'd been there a while, so I had a cushion. And when I actually stopped working, I kept working on the third book in the series because I had a deadline to meet, and then started writing the fourth. So I kind of didn't even take a moment to acknowledge that I achieved my goal. Because I was like, it should feel different, but I really got to write this next scene, and that's what it was. Instead of producing like 3,000 words a day, it was more like between 4 and 5. And it's interesting, those average word counts change with different projects. Like my last one was, between 3 and 4. That's just the way it is. I'm still trying to find that nice balance where you're not getting burnt out, because that's what I want to avoid at all costs. By December, it was such an emotional roller coaster ride that I was done. I was like, yeah, the books are selling awesome. It was amazingly successful, and the other part of me was like, well, this can't last. There's more comfort knowing that failure could happen than, well, keep writing because you may keep on succeeding. So I think you need to take steps to protect your mindset in this. And that comes from not reading your reviews every day. Because all you need is that one idiot who didn't like it. If they didn't like your story, it's fine. But they're the idiots that think they know grammar better than you or science better than you, and they're completely wrong. But I'm not going to debate that on the Amazon review platform. I'm just like, yeah, you're an idiot. Sorry.
Right. There's actually a guy that reviews all of Richard Fox's books, and then, of course, by proxy, the collaboration projects that Scott and I are working on. His name's David P. Duffy, and
I know Duffy.
You got a Duffy,
yeah. And every review he leaves is a scathing 2 or 3 or 1-star review. When I scroll through his reviews, I think I found 1, 4, or 5. But he's read hundreds of books, and so he's read all of Richard's books. He's read all Terra Nova and Bloodlines, and then Scott's book. And Scott, and every time he leaves a review, we're like, "What? Why do you read it if you hate it?
Why do you keep reading this?
Stop reading the book. I don't understand. If you don't read the next one. I don't care. Don't read the next one.
I figured it out. Just now. I bet you that he committed some sort of horrible crime, and the judge sends him to read the book. He has to read 1,000 books he doesn't like and leave reviews, and then he can get out of jail or whatever.
I think one of my reviews from him said that he wasn't going to follow me anymore, and I was like, oh, thank God. Yeah. I was like, not to read my book because I don't, you're not going to like it.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. Every time we publish, and I wait for it, and then the other, and what's crazy is, they're not reviews like I hate this book. He actually
it's a lot of detail.
Delves into the book and writes down. I was surprised though in this last one he actually wrote something. He liked something about it. I can't remember what he liked, but he was like, I really did like this about the book, but the rest of it was shit. And I was like, well, thanks, Dave. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for crushing my soul and giving me the nice compliment. Yeah, good job. So,
but you're right about reviews. Well, you've got to definitely not pay attention to the negative ones unless you're trying to just look for constructive criticism on different things.
You very rarely find them in 1-star reviews. Because I actually went back and looked at all of them for the First Colony series before I started planning book 5, because I was looking for that nugget of insight. And honestly, I'm not catering to the lower half of the 90% of people. The 1% of people who don't like the book, because I'm never going to please them. I want to please the other 90% who like the book and like the story. But sometimes they'll include nuggets in there. I like looking at reviews 3 stars and above, because you'll find the constructive criticism at the 3-star review level. Sometimes in the 2, but not really. 1, they just didn't like it. It's just the way it is.
Right.
So do you want to walk us through kind of what your day looks like now that you've gone full time, or maybe talk about some of the things that are going to be like?
But yeah, I sleep until noon, and then I play video games till 5.
Hammer back a 6-pack of Natural Light. A few tweets, and then I go to bed.
So finally, someone's honest about it.
Yeah. I get all my work done during the day, because that's when nobody's here, and that's the best time. Instead of getting up at 5 before everybody gets up and ready for work and school, I sleep and wake up normal now, and I really start at 8 o'clock and I end at 5. It's not all writing. It's some of it's prep work for writing, and then writing scenes, maybe doing revisions, that kind of stuff. There's always something to be doing, because I'm finding that when I'm going for the 60-day release schedule, so things overlap. It sometimes, like revisions on the previous book, because you get editor feedback, have to occur, and then I do the fun part, which is writing the first draft in the morning and then the revisions in the afternoon, or, prepping the website, getting my links together, registering copyright, that all the stuff that sneaks up on you right before you're about to publish. You want to get your ducks in a row. So it's like that. Like I said before, I'm trying to find what's most comfortable and hit my, I now have weekly word count goals, which are around 20,000 words a week. And I've been experimenting. Well, if I hit that, does it feel good to do it Monday through Friday, or do Monday, Tuesday, and 4 days, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday for writing, and I save Wednesday for a little bit of revisions, but also just coming up with devoting some time to those new story ideas. It gives me a break. I started doing that recently, and I liked that a lot, because it just I found that as I was 3 weeks into writing the first draft, I was getting a little tired of it. You just get exhausted. Your brain gets tired of
you need a break,
spitting out the words for the story. And so I'm still trying to strike that balance that I like for me. And then there are some times where, like when I was finishing Ascension, which is the book 6 of the Ascension series, where I was like, I'm going to stay up and finish this because, well, it's fun, and I just want to get it done. So,
Yeah.
Did I answer your question good enough, or more specifics?
No, I
think that that's actually pretty
feel
unique.
inside.
Yeah, it's actually pretty unique, because I've been struggling with the same thing. What do I do with the time that I have? And so, like, getting up 2 or 3 hours early and making those hours count. But then, like you said, there's all this other stuff that goes into writing that's not drafting. It's planning or website design or maintenance, or checking your not really looking at your sales, but making sure like your ads are working, or there's still things that are happening in the background that don't have anything to do with actually physically writing a book. And so I like that idea of splitting the time between in the week, setting aside a day that I may or may not get any new words this day, but I'm going to be doing writing stuff. I like that a lot.
I found I was taking the time anyway, and I always felt bad about it because I felt I had to produce that word count for the day. And then when I just said, well, I'm going to budget the time anyway, this is the schedule, it made me feel better about it. It was like the guilt was gone, because this is the day I'm going to run errands, because I'm home during the day. So it's that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I had a bit of an off week a couple of weeks ago. We had the NCAA tournament here, so my schedule was all kind of messed up, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to get all the words that I wanted to write. And so I shift gears onto another project and was able to just kind of dabble around on that. And I didn't feel horrible about getting the words done. And then of course, both kids caught the plague. And so I've been battling that for like a whole week, not sleeping and having snot slapped in my face. And so now this week, I'm finally getting back into getting an average. I try to go for an average of 1,500 a day. And
that's good. I mean, I think there's a lot of expectations put on, especially new authors. You're not a new author, but newer authors are like, oh my God, I got to do all this. And I'm like, no, just when I talk to local writers group, I'm like, start with 500. Right. And I'm like, you will get better and you will go up, if you
a lot of people come into it thinking they're gonna come into it and do what their idols are doing. They hear somebody who's successful on a podcast or something saying, yeah, I usually knock out 5,000 words a day. And they think, well, if I'm gonna write my first book, I have to write 5,000 words a day. And that just doesn't work. You got to ease yourself into the lifestyle.
Comparisonitis.
Exactly. Well, it's like running. It's like if you suddenly take up running, you're not going to start with a marathon. You gotta ease yourself up to it. You got to learn the skills that go with it. So
I agree. I think when I look over this year, I started a year calendar spreadsheet that I've got one sheet that has all my writing from all my projects that are documented in the days, and then I have different tabs for specific projects. And so I started out the year. My goal was to do 1,500 a day, all year. But of course, when I made those plans, I didn't realize, well, some of that time is going to be editing. Some of that time is going to be, going back and planning different things. I had a 2-week-long stint where I was in schools and training that I wasn't able to write. And so like I've got all these red blocks that don't have any numbers in them. And I came to the realization that, hey, it's going to be okay. I set the goal. I didn't make it, but I'm still working at it. So it's not really a failure to me. Like I still am trying to hit the average now, and it'll pick up and carry through until I start editing this book, which hopefully will be done here in a couple weeks, and I'll start editing again. So then I'll have another stretch of days where I won't have any new words, but you know what? That's okay. It all works out.
Process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's all working towards getting the book released and turning it and monetizing it, basically.
Right.
So, it's all the work. It's just, like you said, it's not necessarily adding to the word count.
Do you find if you have a longer time than you anticipated for like editing or rewrites or something, and you're not getting those new words, now that those new words are you need to get them done to bring in that paycheck, do you got to get anxious about that, or is that built into your process enough where you're like, okay, I can take a couple extra days here and it's okay?
Yeah, I try to budget a little bit extra days into my plans now, just because when I reach out to my editor, they have other clients besides me. So when I set that date, I try to make it as realistic as possible. And if something happens where 3 weeks before I know I'm not going to hit it, I do let them know. But I do try to budget a little bit extra into my timelines for that. And it's usually, a few days if somebody gets sick, like what you had to deal with. Because my wife's a school nurse and she's always exposed to freaking sick kids, so it's like she brings home the plague.
Make you stronger, building our immune systems through constantly.
Gosh, it was not fun.
My project spreadsheet, I basically break my each project is a book. I break it into 2 phases it just makes it easier for me to actually 3 phases. One is planning and outlining. That's usually 10 to 15 days. Sometimes longer if you haven't been in a series for a year, then it's a month. But otherwise it's 10 to 15 days for me. And then writing the first draft is about a month. But it's really normally working only Monday through Friday. I took my weekends back to give myself some mental sanity. That was nice. Because I remember, you get in that rut where I have to go, and you don't realize how much you're working and not really taking a step back. I think it's important. And then the third phase is for me, it's around 30. It's a 35-day time period where it's either with my editor. My editor does 2 passes. She'll do 1 pass, send it to me, and then I send it back to her, and then it goes to my proofreader. So that time usually takes about a month. During that month, I'll do things like get a book cover, write the blurb, and it accounts for that without itemizing each step. I just know that's how long it takes me. So this was the first year I actually planned out an entire year's worth of projects, which my goal is to release 6 books. Pretty confident I'll hit that. Definitely 5. The 6 might be early January instead of December, but just to accommodate like family vacations, that kind, little things like living.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's cool that you. So I know we're running out of time, but now we're kind of talking about the stuff I like talking about is planning out and then setting your writing schedule for the year. And I've got 3 books that are on the need to be planned and written table. I've got 1 that's almost finished, and then have a couple other projects that I am trying to weigh which ones I'm going to start after my Terra Nova series is done. So not knowing how well this series is going to go and not knowing if you're going to continue it, you're planning out a whole year's worth of writing. Are these all books? You said you're going to keep writing them until they stop selling. So is the year set up to continue to write First Colony? Do you have other stories that are labeled that are set into your calendar to write?
All right. So how I tackled this was the first 6 months projects were already laid out, and they were finish the Ascension series and write 2 more books in First Colony. Then I left the second half of the year open because it depended on how the first half of the year went. So the project time was allocated. It was just I needed projects to put into them.
Gotcha.
And I do have file with story ideas that I go back to and tweak. That was one of the really things I liked about taking Wednesdays. That was my day to go back in there and say, oh man, that was cool. Let me do a little bit more on that. So what I did was eventually people will lose interest in the First Colony series. Eventually that's just the way it is.
Right.
So I wanted to have something new to launch in that time period. So that's when I kind of got a feel for how the first 6 months were going to go. I was like, okay, the next 6 months, or I'm mixing some time frames for projects up where I'm going to write a book but not release it in between. I haven't fully worked it out, but the way the new series is working is it might be multiple timelines where I can zero in on shorter bursts and then go back to writing another novel. Don't know if that's going to work. Check back at the end of the year and I'll let you know.
Back to the Kendall Zito update.
Yes.
So yeah, that's, I definitely wanted something new to release this year because otherwise, again, the top of my business plan is pay my mortgage. It doesn't matter whether I have a bunch of savings or not. That is what influences, any project I'm going to work on. And it takes some of the romance out of being a writer, but it's practical if you want to earn a living.
This might be kind of late, but can you talk a little bit about how you decide, because are you doing right to market? How do you decide this is where I think I should put my efforts forth? How did you decide on this project on the First Colony? What type of genre research did you do, or did you just feel it?
No, I wanted military sci-fi. I dabbled in it a little bit in the Ascension series. I read a lot of it because it's just fun. Like I like Josh Rodzel's Black Fleet trilogy. It was it was fun. I liked it, and I was like, that was really cool. And I read a lot of David Weber. So I wanted to tell a story that had some of those elements, but I wanted a new setting like that. It was a purpose decision not to defend Earth, although I did end up defending humanity. But it was in a nice setting, like a new world, and it just was. It found an audience that was eager for that type of story. So what I do look at is I do pay attention to the top 100. I also do look at what Traditional's doing as well. It doesn't have as much relevance for me as the top 100. I do have a set of authors that I do watch what they're doing as well, because they, especially the guys who've been around for a while, because my goal is to be here, 2 years from now, hopefully doing just as well or better. That's the goal. I don't want to, have this sudden burst of releasing books monthly for a year. And then what are they doing now? Because they're not earning that much. Their books are languishing in the lower ranks. And I can't do that. That's just not going to, it's not going to be for me.
Right.
Because I want to do this for 20 years. I'm only 44. I got a ways to go to retirement.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Can you get there?
Well, I'm excited to see what happens this year with you, and definitely we'll have to have you on for a third anniversary next year to see if it works out the way we're anticipating. Honestly, I think it will. You look at your First Contact series and the sales on those books and even the reviews. I think readers really are eating it up, and congratulations for that. I think that's really great.
Thank you.
think we had some people in our live chat mention they picked up book 1 already, so maybe we'll get some new people interested.
Cool.
And it's on
Thank you.
audiobook too. I picked up the audiobook to listen to.
Oh yeah, I got some credits, so I'll just do that right now.
I'm about 11 minutes away from finishing The Son of the Black Sword by Larry Correa, and then be jumping on to First Contact or First Colony.
Yeah, let me know what you think. I went with I was with Podium for the Ascension series, and then went with I thought about doing it myself, like producing it myself, not reading it aloud. But Audible Inc. said, "Hey, we're interested," and I was like, "Okay." We'll see what you guys can do, because I knew I was going to write another series that I could always produce myself.
Right.
I love Podium and stuff like that, but I wanted a bigger slice of that royalty than most publishers are willing to give you.
Right.
That's the business aspect of it.
And Audible is a big deal, obviously, since most people get their audiobooks through Audible.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're doing pretty well. I don't know if they're going to do like Dennis Taylor well,
that
Bobbyverse, because I love those audiobooks. They were awesome.
Yeah.
And but I definitely earned out the advance and all that crap. So I'm curious to see what that first payment will be. But they got a great narrator for it, and I listened to them on a road trip, so
nice.
It was all good.
Yeah. I'd be curious on another show. I'll have to ask you about maybe the differences, because we all love Podium and we all love Audible, and we talk about audiobooks in general, maybe on one of these episodes.
Yeah, I'm anxious to hear what Richard or Luke Daniels does with the Terra Nova series. He starts. I think he starts it this month, reading it. And
he's a great narrator. I made a list of narrators I would want to contact. He was one of them.
Yeah,
so he's awesome. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it was either him or R.C. Bray, and we were able to lock him down. So that was. I'm really excited to see when that publisher's pack comes out.
Cool.
So tell us where we can go and find out more information about you, your website, and what book is coming out next, and when can we expect it?
Okay. My website's really tough. It's kenlozito.com. Even on there, I'm such an idiot. I put my real name out there. I actually have upcoming books, so that's what I'm working on. The next book will be out probably about 10 days. It's Ascension, which is Ascension series book 6. It's the final book in the series. I am really happy with how I wrapped it up. I really liked how the story wrapped up, and my editor did too. So I have high hopes for it that the audience that's stuck with it will be satisfied. And after that, I'm right now, this week, I'm starting the 5th book in the First Colony series. That won't be out till June, probably mid to late June.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Oh, that's a good question. I actually I reached out to Audible and then didn't hear from them for 3 weeks, and I had Tantor and Podium reaching out to me. I actually reached out to Podium over the summer, said, "I'm doing this in the fall. Are you guys interested?" And then they never contacted me. It's like, all right, well, I guess they don't want it. And then they're like, "Oops, sorry." And I was like, well, I think I was like, I could probably afford to produce the books myself. And then Audible was like, "Hey, have we missed a boat?" And I was like, "No, I think you guys could do a better job at marketing than maybe I could." And I did notice some things like, when you get the, add the Audible version for like $2.99 that they raised to $7.99 for almost everybody else but Audible authors. I was like, oh, that's because I bought books that way on Audible before I became a subscriber, and now I'm a client. Yeah. But yeah, you know what I mean. It's it's that kind of stuff I thought was good.
Yeah, we've now got several people that we talked to in our little collective group where we have people that have gone through Tantor and Podium and audio book, Amazon Audio for audiobooks, and it's really interesting to see like the differences in what the different publishers can do for you, and how they do their different packages and programs. It's all obviously goes back to don't get stuck throwing all your eggs in one basket. I mean, you go through, and there's advantages for going with Audible. There's advantages for going for Podium too. So definitely, when you're in the market for audiobooks, check those out. There's a lot of good things happening in audiobook this year.
Yeah, what blows my mind is some indie authors getting 6-figure deals for audiobooks that they haven't written yet, and they're not really selling that well. And I was like, okay, how does that work? Because I would not produce them myself if I got a 6-figure deal, for the next series.
Well, I think is it Nick Cole's doing an audio only book project?
Yeah, I saw that.
Him and Jason are, yeah. And so then I think that's a huge section of the market that's going to be growing is audio.
What's interesting about what they're doing with their audio series too is they're doing 2 books at a time instead of doing one. So like Legionnaire and Galactic Outlaws is 1 book, and then Kill Team and Attack of Shadows is another book. So they're doubling up their editions for the audio.
A lot of content for the listener.
That's one thing I like that Audible did was they released all 3 on the same day.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you guys are doing that. Because, Podium did space them apart. And I was like, and the text was already done. I don't think it worked as well as when all 3 were released. Because I had already written them and they had already proven that there was a market for them. So it was nice. And then I had those listeners saying, hey, when is book 4 going to be available on audio? And I'm like, not till end of May. That's what I'm being told. But
nice.
We'll get to them.
Yep.
That was good.
Well, everybody that came and hung out with us in the live chat, thank you so much for coming and hanging out and spending your Monday morning with us. It was interesting to have our guest in the live chat. Doesn't normally happen, but it's always fun when it does, and surprised everybody that didn't know that. Haha, he was spying on you and your shenanigans. Also, the shenanigans are saved now for those of you that don't know. They are saved on the videos even after the broadcast, so that's pretty fun. So JR, watch what you say. It was a really good show, Ken. It's always a blast to have you on and talk about writing, man. I think we always learn something from our guests, but it's always nice to have somebody that's been on the show before and just can kind of share that experience again. So thanks for coming back on, man. It was great.
Thank you.
Excellent.
I love coming on. It was great.
Next week we have Devin C. Ford's going to come back and hang out with us for a while. Then on the 23rd, Yudhajaya Vijay Ratna is going to attempt to come on the show. Say a countrywide power outage or something prevented him from coming on a couple weeks ago. So that's why he was not on a couple weeks ago when we had him scheduled. And then on the 30th, Jonathan Brazzi will be on. And fun fact, in September of this year, I've nailed down Peter F. Hamilton to return to the show and talk about his new science fiction novel, Salvation. And that's going to be a fun time. He was back on, he was on first in 2016 in season 1 talking about The Night Without Stars. So it'll be fun to have him back on.
Really cool. It was a good times. Nice guy.
So everybody else, we will see you next week. Come back, hang out with us. We're going to talk about some reading. We're going to talk about some writing. And of course, everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. Later.